This film is dedicated to all persons with disabilities and members of their families who have lost their lives and suffered in a disaster in Myanmar. Myanmar is exposed to multiple natural hazards, including cyclones, earthquake, tsunami, landslides, floods. Through this film, we would like to strengthen your understanding of the importance of inclusion in disaster risk reduction, as well as how to better prepare, respond, and recover in a disaster. To understand the importance of inclusion in reducing disaster risks, we should first define inclusion. The term inclusion refers to the creation of an environment that promotes capacity building and allows for the participation of all in the decisions and processes that affect their lives. Inclusion recognizes strengths and capacities and builds everyone's confidence. It addresses barriers to meaningful participation. Capacity building plus effective participation equals inclusion. Integration is when people are invited to join in activities but don't receive the special assistance or preparation that they need to be able to participate effectively. For example, people with disabilities might be invited to a village meeting on developing a community-based disaster risk management plan. However, without proper training, they might not understand the discussion. It is not enough to have invited them. Inclusion, however, is when people are invited to participate in community activities and are provided with support according to their needs so that they are able to participate effectively. For example, people will have been offered content pre-operational support before joining a meeting to develop a disaster preparedness plan. They can therefore follow the discussion and participate in the decision-making process. Inclusion lies at the heart of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, or UNCRPD. Persons with disabilities campaigned for decades for a convention on human rights of their own. The UNCRPD represents a clear shift from seeing and treating persons with disabilities as objects of charity to their recognition as subjects of law with equal rights. UNCRPD is written by and for persons with disabilities. It is for persons with long-term physical, mental, intellectual, and sensory impairments. UNCRPD is committed to breaking down barriers so that persons with disabilities can be included in society. Myanmar ratified the UN CRPD in 2011. It means all of us should take actions to ensure that persons with disabilities can enjoy their human rights. The UN CRPD sets out the rights of persons with disabilities, including the right to choose support for independent living, the right to work, the right to be free from violence and harassment, the right to have their voices heard, the right to equal access to sports, leisure, and culture, the right to accessible information in ways that can be understood, the right to have equal access to all necessary measures and participation in education to ensure their protection and safety in situations of risk, including armed conflict, humanitarian emergencies, and natural disasters. Now that we have a better understanding of inclusion and the rights of persons with disabilities, we will look at inclusive disaster risk reduction and why it is important. All persons are affected by a disaster. However, women, men, older people, children, and persons with disabilities are affected disproportionately. Persons with disabilities are often one of the most vulnerable groups in disaster, crises, or emergencies. To evacuate safely, they often need assistance from their family members, village disaster risk management committee, or a rescue team. You may ask, what is a disability? What are the barriers? How do we remove barriers to reduce disaster risks? We should first understand what hazards and disasters are. A hazard is any phenomenon, substance, or situation which can affect health, people, and their properties. Natural hazards include cyclones, floods, landslides, earthquake, tsunami, a disaster is any serious disruption causing widespread human, material, economic, or environmental loss which exceeds the ability of the affected community to cope using its own resources. It is a process of disaster risk management in which communities at risk are actively engaged in the identification, analysis, treatment, monitoring, and evaluation of disaster risk in order to reduce their vulnerabilities and enhance their capacities. I want to use an example to explain strengths and weaknesses in disaster risk reduction strategies. The weakness of this evacuation road is that it is narrow. Because of its slope, it is difficult to evacuate. The strength of this evacuation road is that it is wide. There is no slope, and it is easy to evacuate. The weakness of this evacuation center is that it is not appropriate for all people with disabilities. The strength of this evacuation center is that it has been made appropriate for disabled people using wheelchairs. The weakness of the roof of these small houses is that the cyclone will swipe them out when it comes. The strength of retrofitted buildings is that it can withstand cyclone winds. The weakness of this early warning system is that deaf people cannot hear its early warning. The strength of this early warning system is that deaf people can receive early warning by installing signal alarms. The weakness here is that these people with disability cannot access information about loss and damage due to disaster. The strength here is that they can access the information if it is provided with IEC, sign language, and pictures. All of this information will be useful and valuable when the disaster happens. The more they have access to strengthened systems, the less they will be affected when a disaster happens. Here are some tips on what we can do before, during, and after a disaster. Listen to radio, TV, news, and weather forecasts issued by local authorities. Keep national ID cards, family registration cards, important documents, and money in an emergency kit. Keep basic medicine and first aid kits ready. Know where the nearest evacuation center is located. Make your roof stronger to withstand strong cyclone winds. Fully recharge your phone. If your house is not strong enough, go and stay in a safer house with family or friends. Unless your house is strong enough to withstand flooding, stay in a secure house. Unplug all electrical devices. If your house is not strong enough, go and stay in a safer house with family or friends. Keep purified water, dry food, candles, and torchlights handy. Stay under a strong table when earthquakes occur. Cover your head and go to a safer place. If the earth is shaking and the river level is rising rapidly due to a tsunami, move upland. Remember that tsunami can occur even after an earthquake. When disaster happens, no one should be left behind. Ensuring active participation can improve disaster prevention and mitigation. We believe that no one should be left behind in a disaster. Inclusion increases the strength of the community. We hope that this film has helped your understanding of inclusion and the importance of including persons with disabilities to reduce disaster risks.